friends! Welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. Welcome to Build a Hacker News Client with the new Vue 3.0 function-based component API. Yeah, so I actually gave a talk at a meetup this week on Monday about this topic, and I recorded my screen, but it turns out I didn't have my microphone on. So I'm going to do the same talk I did at the meetup about just like an introduction to what this API is, and then we're going to build something with it, which will be fun. Let's say hello to all the wonderful people in the chat. Hello, Ran, with all the fruit emojis. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Said, who is from Morocco. That's great. Welcome. So many emojis from Ran. Hello, Daniel Garden. Welcome to the stream. Hello, Luis. Hello, Yossi. Hello, Bohan. Hello, Abhishek. Hello, Spacey. Hello, Desi. Hello, Luis. Hello, Vias. Welcome, everyone, to the show. So, if you have been on the internet in the past month or so and you follow Vue News, you probably saw all of the controversy surrounding this new API that is going to be introduced in Vue 3.0. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce it. I'm going to do a quick introduction to what this thing is. I'll show you some basic examples. We'll build a super app. And then once we know what it is, we're going to try to build something a little bit more complex. We're going to build basically this using an API. This is the Hacker News website. Let's see how this looks. Might be cutting off some words. I can stand like right here. All right, let's do this. So this is an introduction to the Vue 3.0 function-based component API. First, we're going to talk about what is it. We'll talk about what problems does it solve, what are the benefits, how do we use it today, right now, here, and then we'll build a simple image search app using that new API. So first, what is it? It is a new API for creating components introduced as an RFC in Vue 3.0. I realize I'm like covering up some of the text. So it's a new API. It is purely additive to Vue 2, meaning when Vue 3 comes out, pretty much most of the things you've done in Vue 2 will still work. But this is sprinkling a little bit extra on top that you can, it's giving you an alternative way of creating components in Vue 3 when it does come out. And to that point, it is currently an open RFC. RFC stands for request for comments, meaning it's not set in stone and it can be changed based on user feedback. It can be changed based on the core members of the Vue team if they decide that something isn't feasible. Things can change. I'll say this right now. Everything you're about to see in this video, if you're watching like more than a month from now, is probably wrong and doesn't work anymore. I mean, some of it will still be relevant, but everything I'm going to show you today is like bleeding edge. And yeah, so keep that in mind. Now, what problems does it solve and what are the benefits? First thing, it presents a clean and flexible way to compose logic inside and between components. If you've ever worked on large vue.js applications, typically you might use things like mix-ins or higher order components or renderless components, renderless functions, to basically share things between your components and throughout your application. But this presents a lot of problems. And this new API is aiming to solve those problems. It is naturally type friendly. So there was an RFC for the class-based API, which would allow you to create Vue components, but using like class syntax. But that RFC actually got scrapped because it presented some complications with adding or inferring types on your classes. And this API, because it's just functions, is super type friendly. You can use TypeScript with this new API. And another one is that it has a smaller bundle size. So the APIs that is exposed are a bunch of little functions, which I'm going to show you. And if you're not using any of those functions, when you bundle your app, you can easily tree shake some of those other functions that you're not using away. And then also in the future, if they introduce new APIs, they're simply just going to be new functions that you can import in. So you can start using new features later on. So it's super interesting. It has a lot of benefits. How do we use it today? So let's say you want to use it right now. It's not out yet. Vue 3 isn't out yet. There's still a ton of RFCs for Vue 3.0. It's not official yet. So how can we use it today? Well, there is this wonderful package called vue-function-api, and you can install it into your Vue.js 2.0 application. So something generated using the CLI, or if you have a Vue app that you're just using a CDN link, you can bring in this plugin and it will allow you to use the new API in your Vue applications. So Once you've installed it, then you can import the plugin from vue-function-api and then use that plugin. And then you can use it. So let's talk about how all this is going to work. Now, if you've ever used Vue.js before, this template will look very familiar to you. There's nothing new here. So we have an h1. It's using either a computed property or a property from our data right here to display the full name. We have an input that's bound to first name, which is a reactive property, and we have an input that's bound to last name, which is a reactive property. So far, this template is just like you've seen before. Nothing has changed in the template. But when we get into the JavaScript, that is where things change. So the first thing is you import the functions that you need to use into your component. And right now, because it doesn't exist in Vue yet, we have to import it from vue-function-api. But once Vue 3.0 is released, you'll be importing these functions just directly from Vue instead of vue-function-api. In this case, we're bringing in value, which allows us to create reactive properties. We're bringing in computed, which allows us to create computed properties. There are lifecycle hooks you can bring in and lots of other things. For now, those are just the ones that I need. And then your component has one function set up. So you don't have data, you don't have methods, you don't have watch, you don't have computed. You just have one function called setup. And that function will get 2 arguments. It'll get the props. So if this component has props or accepts props, then those will be accessible as that argument. And then you also get a context argument, which has all of the things that you're used to being on this. So things like adders, emit, parent, root, all of that can be accessed from context. And then inside of this setup function is where you do all of your component logic. So we saw that template before. It has first name, last name, and full name on there. So first name is a reactive property. We're using the value function to create a reactive property where the initial value is CJ. And then we have this last name reactive property where the initial value is R. Easy enough. So think of these 2 things as just 2 properties on your data object. And then if you want to create a computed, we can use this computed function from the API. And you'll notice, so computed takes in a function. This is going to be the function that reruns anytime it needs to be recomputed. And here we're just going to have a string that has first name space last name. But you'll notice in order to access the actual values of these reactive properties, we just say first name.value and last name.value. The reason we do this is because Vue wouldn't be able to keep track of just like a primitive string changing. So it's basically this value creates like an object wrapper with a value property that has the latest value. You'll notice though that in the template, we didn't have to say .value. We can still just do it the old way, which is awesome. And then the last thing you do in your setup function is you return an object. And then anything that is in this object will be available inside of the template. So because we're returning first name, last name, and full name in our object here, that is available inside of the template to use. So it's a super simple API for creating Vue components. And that produces this result. So we have our h1 there that has the computed full name. We have an input that is bound to first name and an input that is bound to last name. But now if I update these things, coding garden, we can see that the computed updates up top, and these 2 are bound to those properties. So it's a super simple API. There's a lot more you can do with it. And like I mentioned before, there are quite a few benefits to it. Right now, we're just showing like a super basic example. But yeah, that's it. And then we will build an image search API. So an image search app using this new API. If you watched a while back, I did an episode where I was learning Svelte and I built an image search. We're going to build something almost exactly the same, but we're going to use this new functional API. Before I get into that, I'm going to catch up on the chat because I just did a presentation. I just straight talked through everything. Let's see all the people. Cool. And hello, Pijo. Pijo is based in the Denver area. They say you should post about Denver Vue meetups in the Denver Dev Slack. Keep missing it. There's a specific channel. So if you check out meetup-vue.js, I think that's what it is. We post in there when the meetups are happening. Hello, Justin. Welcome to the stream. Rand is saying awesome background. Appreciate it. Yeah, I like to do these cinemagraphs from my slide decks. Hello, Amado. Amado is asking, what is a context in JavaScript? Typically, this has to do with when you're creating an instance of either a class or a constructor function. the class or the constructor function is kind of like the blueprint that you can use to make multiple copies. Each copy needs its own context. Otherwise, each copy would interfere with each other. So a context in JavaScript is the fact that each instance or copy of your object has its own context. I use the word in the definition. I don't know, but cool. IC Killer is asking, how do you use lifecycle hooks? So I'll point you to the actual repo for this vue-function-api, and you can see here all of the lifecycle hooks you would just import and then pass a function. So if I wanted to do onMounted, I would import it from vue-function-api, pass in a function, and then my mounted code can go inside of there. Every other lifecycle event is available as a function that you can just import. Yeah. And Felix says, hello from the Dominican Republic. Hello, Felix. Welcome. Okay, let's build a super simple image search application. Here we go. I have a to-do right here. So first thing we'll do is we'll create a new Vue CLI app. So the interesting thing about this plugin is that it works today with Vue 2.0. So let's say Vue create Vue 2 image search. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Like that. We're going to manually select our features. This is going to be a super basic app. We really just want Babel and the linter. We won't need a router or anything. It's just going to be one page. We'll use Airbnb, lint on save, put everything in the package JSON, go. Yeah. And as I mentioned, once I'm done making this super simple app, I am going to build a Hacker News client, which will be a little bit more complex. And hopefully, and most likely, I'll be able to use some of these lifecycle methods. I'm going to look into using vue-hooks. So this is a collection of hooks, composable hooks that you can use with the new functional API. Things like using Vuex, so you have like useStore, useState, useRouter if you want to use ViewRouter. So when we make the more complex app, I might actually delve into this and use some of those, so that'll be interesting. Okay, so we're gonna go into Vue 2 image search. We're start it up. There we go. We've got ourselves a Vue app. And I'm going to kill that other app that I had going. Let's kill this one. Okay. Not that. That. All right. What do we do first? Let's actually clean some things up. So I really just want one component. I'm going to have my app.vue component, and everything is going to be inside of there. So I'm going to get rid of everything else. Let's delete this components folder. Let's delete this assets folder. We're going to get rid of all these styles. We don't need any components. We're just going to start with a super basic component, and then we're going to use this new function-based component API. That looks good to me. Let's add some basic CSS in the HTML here. And then in our app.vue, let's just throw like nh1. Hello world. Does it work? It works. Cool. No errors in the console. Okay. So the first step is to install this library, vue-function-api. So in that directory here, I'm going to do npm install vue-function-api. Actually, I'm going to kill my slide. I think my slide deck is trying to refresh while all the files are changing. Okay, so we installed it. Now we need to use it. So in our main.js, we can import it in. So here we'll say import plugin from vue-function-api. And then we say vue.use plugin. And this now enables that new API. So this allows me to add that setup function to my component, and I can do all the new stuff. Okay, so we've installed it. Let's look at our to-do. That's done. Now let's actually use it. So in our component here, it's super basic. We're going to bring in that value function. So let's import value from vue-function-api. Cool. And then remember, our component has one function. It's the setup function. So we have setup. In this case, we don't have any props. We don't need to access the context. So it's just a super basic setup function. And for now, let's just test it out, make sure that it works. Let's create a reactive property called message. And this is going to be value that starts off with the value hello world. Now our setup function returns an object. We're going to add message to it so that we can access it inside of the template. So because this returns an object that has message inside of it, now in our template, we should be able to do this. Message. My keyboard is really acting up today, but that should show the message. Let's see. There it is. Yay. Let's change it to make sure that it's actually working. So if I say, hello world, rainbow, oh no, wave, globe. There it is. So it's working. So we're using the new function-based API. The first thing we want to do is create a form. So we made our setup function. Now all of our code is going to go inside of that. We need a form so we can actually search for images. So let's create a form. Inside of it, we'll have a label. This will say search. We'll then have an input. And it will be bound to search on our component. And so for this, I now need a reactive property called search. It's going to start off as an empty string, and then I return it in my object so that I can use it in my template. Just to make sure that it's working, we could render out the search value here. Let's see it happen. So if I search for cats, we can see that as we type, it's bound and it's showing up below. So that's great. We have our search bound. So we bound it. Now we're going to listen for submit on the form and then set loading to true. So this all works the same way that you know it. I'll say @submit. We'll do .prevent to prevent the default action. And then I'm going to specify a function that it should call. And let's call this search GIFs. Now I need a function search GIFs. So I will create one. And that's just going to be a simple little function defined in here. And for now, when the form is submitted, let's just log search.value. So we'll log whatever is in the input box. And then now, to make this accessible in my template, I need to add it to this object here. So now that we're returning this function inside of the object, this makes sense and it should call it whenever the form is submitted. Okay. So if I search for cats and hit enter, we see cats is logged to the console. So it's calling that function that I created. That's great. What's up next? Set loading to true. So I want to show like a loading GIF while we're waiting for the GIFs to come back, and then I'll hide it. So let's do this. I think I have, we have this loading guy here. So right below that, I'll create a div, give it a class of loading. Throw that image in there, and I only want to show this if we are loading. So now I need another reactive property called loading that will initially be false. And then we'll return it so that way we can use it. And then now inside of this submit function, we'll say loading.value equals true. So that's the one thing about using this new API is when you're modifying reactive properties, reactive values, you do have to say .value. You can't just modify it directly. So that should do it. And so now if we search for cats and hit enter, we see the loading GIF. So that's great. What's next? Call the API with the search term. So we have this API URL. On the end here, it has q equals, and we can pass in our query. In this case, it's going to be our search term. So inside this function, I'll make this an async function. And then we'll just say response is going to be equal to await fetch with the API URL plus search.value. So whatever the user typed into the input box, we're going to append to the end of this URL. So it'll search for those types of GIFs. And then we'll grab the JSON. And then we'll just log it out. Let's see what happens. Okay, so if I search for cats and hit enter, there's our data. So we're getting data back from the API. Now we actually want to show it on the page. If I go into the data array, this is each individual GIF. It has an images property that has a fixed height property. Let's use that. And then we can grab the URL. So let's copy property path. And now basically I just want to create an array of all the image URLs. So let's create another reactive property. We'll call it GIFs. This is going to start off as an empty array. And then we'll say GIFs equals json.data.map. So that's going to give us each GIF. And then we want to take that property from each GIF. And we do need to do gifs.value. So we're going to, when the component starts up, it starts off as an empty array. We get the data back from the API, and we override that array with a new array of all the image URLs. And then we need to show them on the page. So let's add a little div here. Let's call this images. And we only want to show this if we are not loading. And we'll throw a little image tag in here, and we're going to repeat it. So we're going to say v4 gif in gifs. And the key is going to be the GIF URL because it should be unique. And the source is going to be the GIF URL. Great. But now I need to make sure that GIFs is returned in this object so that it can be accessed in the template. So we will also return it there. We can set loading to false so that way that the GIFs will show up. So let's do that. I'm actually just going to do a set timeout of 2 seconds, so that way the results don't display immediately. There's a little bit of time while we're seeing the loading, and then the GIFs will pop up. So here we'll say loading.value equals false. And then let's just add some basic styles. So we'll say images has a column count of 4. Any image on the page has a width of 100%. And we'll say the loading section image, well, no, we'll say the loading section should have margin 0 auto. I think that should put the loading image in the center. Well, let's see what we got. Okay, so I search for cats. I hit enter. We're loading, and then we get all the cats back. Yay! And I should be able to search for laser eyes. Loading. Yay, we get them all back. Cool. So this is a super simple app, but kind of just demonstrating the new API. So, and in this case, we're not using computed. We're not using any of the lifecycle methods. We're simply just using value to create some reactive properties. And then everything else kind of works the same way as we know it in Vue 2. The one caveat is when you're changing a value, you do have to say .value. But other than that, it's pretty nice. Cool. I believe that's all I had for like intro to this API. I did mention before, it is this library. So if you check out this repo on GitHub, you can see all of the other functions that are available. So you saw me using value. There's also state, which is equivalent to view.observable, which exists today. But that would actually allow you to create an object with multiple properties on it, and then potentially use that inside of your template instead of having individual reactive properties using the value function. There's computed, there's watch, you have your lifecycle methods. Yeah, that's about it. All right, let's catch up on the chat. Hello, Andy, who says, is your mouth still burning? Actually, I'm fine. And surprisingly, I was like, so we're talking about the Hot Ones episode of Code Katas where I ate like really spicy hot wings. I was okay within a day. I got over it really quick. I was actually very surprised. Bohan is saying, what's the hotkey for emojis? This is actually just a Mac shortcut. If you do Command Control Space, you get the emoji menu. If you're on Windows 10, you can do Windows key period and it'll pop up. Hello, Brooks. Welcome to the stream. Hello, Amy. Axel is asking, won't you use Vuex? I think I want to. So that was an introduction to the API. Now we're going to try to build something a little bit more complex. We're going to try to build this, and I think we will use Vuex. I think it just makes sense. I want this to be as complicated as possible. Daniel Garden is asking, what icon theme do I use in VS Code? That is a great question. Someone suggested it to me. Actually, I think it was it RabbitWorks JavaScript? But I think it's called VS Code icons. Yeah, this is the one I use. VS Code icons. They're very nice. Very colorful. Cool. Yeah, and Felix asked a great question. So they says they're new to Vue.js. They came from Backbone. What I'm learning now in Vue 2 will be usable in Vue 3. Yes, absolutely. So that was a big part of the controversy with this new API, is that initially people thought that the old way of doing things with your data property, your methods, your lifecycle methods at the top level, your computed, they thought all of that was going away. But it's not. It's all still going to be there. In Vue 3, you can still write apps the way you're learning today. The only difference is you have this functional API available to you, and you can use it if you want to. I'll link to the questions and answers here about the functional API. And then there's this big long thread where a lot of the whole Twitter back and forth and people freaking out started. I'm not going to share that because I don't know. No, we don't need to contribute to the drama. Yeah. And hello, Ellen. Wave. Okay, so I wanna make a Hacker News client, but we're gonna use this new functional API. So let me kill my other app. Oh yeah, and I'll point out just real quick that code that I just wrote is available on GitHub. It's actually on my personal GitHub. Internet's kind of slow, or GitHub's slow. I don't know. But if you want to check out that code I just wrote and the notes that I just wrote, you can check out that repo there. Okay. Where are we? Where were we? Let's close this. Yeah, this. Okay. So there are actually quite a few Hacker News APIs out there. And this is one that I found. It seemed to be the easiest, so I'm just going to use it. But you can make a request for news, page 1. This will give you back a JSON array of all the latest stories. You can go page 2, page 3, etc. And then you can get information about an individual item. So for instance, if I want to see all the comments for this one with this ID, I can say item/ID. This gives me back all of the comments, and they're nested if they're replies for that given item. So that one is, let's see. It might be a little bit behind. This is show. Yeah, I think this API is a little bit behind from the real-time data, but regardless, all the data is there for us. We can also get user information by requesting /username, and this is what we're gonna do. So we're gonna basically make an app with the new functional API that has multiple pages. So it'll have new, past, latest comments, ask, show, and then you'll be able to go into the comments of a given one and then see all the comments. We're gonna do it. It's gonna be great. But we should probably create a to-do. So I think the first thing is generate an app. With the CLI, we're going to need the router. I do want to use Vuex. Like I said, I want to try to make this as as complex as possible. We're gonna have tons of little function components. We're gonna try to make things reusable. We're gonna push this API to its limits. Okay, so router, Vuex. Do I want Sass? I don't need Sass. We'll just do regular CSS. Cool. Then we need to install the vue-function-api. Is that what it's called? Yeah, vue-function-api. Then we will need to, I guess, like, set up the routes. Then we will create a reusable list, like news list component. So if you look at this site, every single page, like new, past, ask, show, jobs, they all have the exact same layout and a very similar data structure. It's just different categories of data. So my idea is we'll build one component that can kind of be reused for each different page. So we'll do that. Create a reusable news list component. What else? Create the view single item page. And on that page, we want the link, the description, and then we want to show all of the comments, including nested comment replies. And we'll keep this tab open while we go, just to make sure we're not forgetting anything. I think that's a good to do. Let's see if anybody said anything in the chat. Alka says you always want Sass. I don't know. I'm not gonna do Sass. I'm gonna do my best to just use basic CSS and make it look somewhat like this. Okay, let's go. Let's generate the app. So we'll do view create hacker news client. Select our features. So we want a router, we want Vuex, and we don't want Sass. That's all we want. Use history mode for the router. Let's say no. We'll just use hash router. We'll use ESLint with Airbnb, and we'll put it all in the package JSON. Go. Amy thinks basic CSS would be fine. It's a pretty basic website. I guess I should probably link to how I found this API, because there's an entire page that lists all of the Hacker News clones or client. View the source. It's super interesting because it's very similar to do MVC, if you've ever seen that before, where people create the exact same application in a lot of different frameworks. And so this is very similar, but they did it with Vue. Trying to see where I found it earlier. Hacker News API. It's like a GitHub repo. I don't know. I feel like I should find it. Yeah, this is like the official API. The one I'm using is not so official. I think this is it. Yeah, so this is the API that I'm using, and I think they link to it somewhere. I don't know. I found it earlier. but basically, a lot of people have built this same app, but using Vue or using React or using Svelte or whatever. And we're going to do it today with the vue-function-api. Okay. Our app generated. Let's go into it and we'll run it. Yay, we got an app. Felix is asking, don't you prefer to use Axios instead of Fetch? It depends. I actually have lately, mainly because Axios is Axios will throw errors if there's like a 404 or something like that, whereas Fetch, you have to handle that manually. So I do like that about Axios. And yes, we absolutely could make like a reusable service class. So like a class that just calls these API things directly, and we can just say like API.get news and pass in the page number or something like that. We're definitely going to do something like that. Christian, what's up? Hello, welcome to the stream. Orlando is saying Fetch versus Axios. I think that's just it. It's nice that Fetch is built into most modern browsers, and it's fairly easy to use. However, if you want to do any kind of error handling for like a 404 or a 500 status code or something like that, you have to do that manually with Fetch, whereas Axios handles all of that for you already. Okay, so we generated the app. We have a router, we have Vuex. Let's install this vue-function-api package. Great, and now let's set it up. So in our source main.js, we can import in that plugin from the vue-function-api, and then we need to use it. So right here, we'll just say vue.use plugin. Cool, so now we can use the new API. Let's clean things up. So I'm gonna delete this hello world component. Goodbye. We're gonna get rid of those assets. Goodbye. If we look at views, there's the home view. It's using that hello world component. We'll just get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Cool. Our about component is already super basic. Our app.view is set up to use view router. We'll get rid of these default styles. Let's see what happens. Cool. We have a super basic view app. It has absolutely 0 styles. Cool. Let's look at our to-do. Okay, so we installed it. Let's set up the routes. Yeah, so we want all of the same routes that the main Hacker News site has. So you have /news, which is the homepage. You have /new, which are any, like, the newest stories. And if we look, we have those endpoints. So news will give us the most upvoted, I guess, ones. Newest are the newest. Show HN, ask HN, jobs, and then individual items. So we want 1, 2, 3, 4. We want 5 different pages. So let's set that up in the router. I mean, actually, do we? We could really just do this with one component that just looks at the URL and then changes which API it's hitting. I don't know. Let's just get, okay, I'm backtracking on my to-do. Let's just get the news page working, like this one, and then we'll go from there. We'll see what we would need to do to create these other pages. I think that's what we'll do. Okay. So create news page. All right. And we don't want to show any links. We're just going to have our router view. I guess actually we would, but we probably want something like a navbar component. Let's do that. Let's just start. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make this navbar. So here in components, I'm gonna create a new file. We'll call it navbar.view. Scaffold it out. This is gonna be a nice little div. It'll say Hacker News. And then we need to show each thing. I guess we could show it as a, we can use a router link. New. Do we have, I don't think we have access to pass. We just have news, newest, show, and ask. Okay. News, newest, show, ask, and I think they're also jobs. Yeah, okay, that's what we'll do. I believe we can say 2. For now, they're all just gonna go to slash. And now in our app.vue, we'll bring in this navbar component. So we need a script. Import navbar from components/navbar. And there's a super chat from Felix. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Thank you. Cool. Yeah, super chat from Felix. That's great. Daiquiri says, sup, what's up? Orlando is saying a spa is not good for SEO. It depends. It used to be that search engines did not run the JavaScript on your page, but now a lot of them do. And that could potentially lead to slower load times, though, which would make your search ranking show up lower. The answer to that is to use something like Nux.js if you're using Vue, which is a hybrid of server-side rendering and a single-page application, or using Next.js if you're using React, or using a pre-built site using something like Gatsby or Hugo or some of those other things. And it really all depends. I see people talking about SEO so much. In my job, I have never had to deal with SEO. I'm always building like internal applications or applications that don't have SEO on them. We might have like a marketing site that has SEO, but our actual website doesn't need it. So I don't know. It varies. Okay. How did this get back in here? I thought I got rid of the nav. Oh well. Okay. So now in our component, we need to specify components. And we'll throw navbar in there. And then we'll use it. So right above the router view, we want to do navbar. And we should see a navbar. Let's see. There it is. We'll give it a little bit of styles. Let's see what font they're using. It might just be like a basic sans serif. Verdania. Let's just add that to our entire app. So like in our app.vue, let's just say body font family is that. Nice. And then in our navbar, let's make this a flexbox. And I guess right now the navbar doesn't really need any script, doesn't need any component stuff. So yeah, and then our navbar class will have a display of flex and a flex direction of row, which I think it should have by default. Yep, so now it all goes across like that. That's great. We want to give it this nice orange background color. Let's see what color that is. That one. Is it this one? This BG color? No, it's this RGB here. So we'll say background color is that. What do we get? Nice. Can we just grab this little image here? What's the SRC? Whoa. We should probably put it inside of a container so it doesn't stretch because of the flexbox. Yeah, so it's nice like that. Cool. And it looks like it has a 1 pixel outline. Nav logo. Realizing I'm spending more time on CSS than at the actual like vue-function-api. That's fun. I don't know. CSS is fun. It's fun to practice CSS. So we'll say outline 1 pixel solid white. Nice. Okay. This is a flexbox. We want everything to be centered like in the middle. So I think I can do justify content center when it's a flex direction row. No, we'll do, I mean, technically we do want that, but we also want align items center, which will center it vertically like that. Cool. There needs to be a little bit of spacing around the nav logo. So let's just say margin 2 pixels. 10 pixels. That's good. Let's see the font size of this thing up top. 10 points. So let's just make that a paragraph tag then. And we'll say navbar p font size 10 pixels. And font weight bold. Nice. But actually it needs to be increased a little bit. What if we do like some relative units? Way too big. 1M. I like that. Cool. Next up, we have all these links. They need to be spread out a little bit. I believe these will just show up as anchor tags, so I might be able to style the anchor tags. Yeah. So if I say navbar anchor tag has a margin of 10 pixels, just like the image, should separate them a little bit. That's nice. We'll say text decoration is none, and color is black. Nice. I like that. Cool. I wonder if I can do something interesting like navbar a after. I could do an after and say the content is like one of those. Will that work? Whoa, that's pretty cool. So it does add it, but it's immediately after it. I might just add it in manually. Snookulo is saying, why not create your own style instead of looking at the actual one? Mainly because I just want it to be a clone. It's using the exact same data. Sheriff is asking a good question. What's the difference between outline and border? So border is on the outside of the content. So if we look at this element, and you can actually use the element inspector here to see what's happening. So you'll see that the margin is on the outside, the border is on the outside, padding is on the inside, and then you have the actual content itself. So outline will not affect the width or the height of the element. It just surrounds it. But if you did border, that would actually, it would be on the outside of the content, so the width would actually be increased a little bit. So outline won't change the size of it, and it'll keep it in the same place. Can I give after a margin? Margin left of 10 pixels? I'm okay with that. Yeah, perfectly fine. All right, now let's put all of our items below it. So in our app.view, this is loading the router view. And we do have our home page. This is where we're going to do all the stuff to actually list out the item. So we'll get rid of the Vue logo. Great. We want it to have this background color, which I think is that. So we'll add a style here. Background color is that. I think something happened. Oh, it doesn't have any content yet. That's fine. Hello? Yeah, so that works. And this is where we're going to list out all of our items. So, yeah, for now, I'm just going to make it work, and then we can think about how we can refactor this or how we're going to create multiple pages. But let's just make this thing work. So ultimately, I need to repeat over some items, and I need to actually request those items. So those are going to be coming from this endpoint here, news, page 1. So in our home component, let's go ahead and set up our component. So we have this setup function, and we need to make an API request when the thing is mounted. So here's what we need to do. We're going to import value so we can create a reactive property that is all of the news elements. And then we also will need on created, which is the lifecycle hook, so that when the component is created, we'll go ahead and request those things from the API. And this is going to come in from vue-function-api. Cool. So we'll create a reactive property called items. This is going to be value. Starts off as an empty array. We could also have like a loading property. That actually starts off as true. Because when this whole thing starts, we're waiting for the data to come back from the API. And then now in our onCreated, we pass it a function. And this function we pass it will be invoked when the component is created. So in here is where I actually want to make that API request. Let's create a variable like base URL. Like that. And then we'll use fetch for now. We'll just use fetch. I know some people asked about fetch versus Axios, but we're just going to use fetch. Base URL plus that news page 1. So that should request the first page of news. This does need to be an async function. And then we'll grab our JSON. And then we'll just log it out, see what happens. Okay, our setup function needs to return an object. The things we want to access in the view are the items and loading. And for now, we'll just have a little div if loading. We'll just say loading. And let's see what happens. Let's look at the console. We get our data back. And Patrick Young donated $1.99 through Super Chat. Let's read his Super Chat. Always enjoy watching and learning. Thank you so much, Patrick. That's awesome. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so Snookulo had the idea of creating our own styles. That would be interesting. We could do Coding Garden themed. I don't know, use like a green and black color instead of the default one. I think the thing is, once we create it, we can style it any way we want it. So we'll go from there. But the component's mounted or created, makes the request out to the API, and then logs out the data. So we have the data here. That's great. Now we just need to repeat over it and show all of the elements on the page. So let's do that. And I think for this, I'll create a separate component just called like news item. And that will basically be this one line here. And then we'll repeat the news item component. Fix some things. Okay, but right here is where we can say items.value equals that JSON. So that'll set it, and then we'll say loading.value equals false. Because we requested the data, and then we set it on our items and set loading to false. Now we'll have a div here, and then we'll create a component that's called like news item. And we're going to repeat it for each item in items. And then we're going to pass that item down. And the key will be item.id. I think it has an ID property. We'll see. Let's just keep logging it out so we can see the properties in the console. But yeah, it has an ID property, so that should be unique. And now news item doesn't exist. So we need to create that news item component so that way we can pass the data down to it. So in here, we'll create a new file. We'll call it news item. It'll have a super basic template. For now, we'll just throw like an h3 with item.title. And then we do have to define what our props are. So here our props are item. And that's it. Let's see what happens. Nothing, because we need to register the component. Okay, so I have this super basic component that takes in an item and then just shows its title on the page. Now in our app, we need to bring in that news item component. And then we register it, and then it should start working. Did I register the component correctly? Oh, I registered this in the wrong place. Not in app.vue, but in our home component. Here, this is where I need to register it. So we'll import news item from go up one directory into the components directory and grab that news item. And then we need to specify it on components. Like that. Yay! Cool. So super basic so far. We make the request. We're listing out the news items here. Let's get the styles going. I know, what's his name in the chat, wants me to do my own styles, but I kind of like copying the styles just to see if I can do it. Who was it? Snowkilo? Yeah, I'm going to try to copy the styles just because it's fun to see if you can emulate what their site looks like. Bohan is asking a question. Do you follow any rules while styling a page, or it's all about common sense, how you choose color palette, fonts? Typically for things like color palette, I'll use a color palette generator. Yeah, there's like coolers.com. It'll create palettes for you. Fonts, I use a website called fontpair.co. And this gives you some nice pairings of like title fonts and body fonts. Yeah, I just use things like that. To me, it's not really common sense, though. You do kind of either want to hire a designer or try to develop a bit of a design eye. And really, you can develop that by just looking at good websites. Yeah. Felix is asking, you did import onCreated and then declared it. That's overriding it. We're not overriding it. We're invoking it. So we import the onCreated function, and then we invoke it. So right here, we're actually invoking it and then passing in a function that should be called whenever onCreated happens. So, hey, Chris says, CJ, great seeing you use the Vue API. Thanks, it's pretty fun. I gave a meetup talk on it on Monday, and I'm curious to see what I can do with it. Yeah. Oh, and I guess I've been coding this thing, but I did say we were going to try to use Vuex. Yeah, okay. I'm going to style this component, but then I'm going to set up Vuex. I want this data to be coming from the store rather than just calling it and using it directly in the component. But let's style this thing. We definitely need to bring that font size way down. So on our news item, let's give it some styles. We'll make this scoped so it just affects this component. Yeah, we'll put the title there, and then below it are going to go all the details. We'll give it a class name of news item, and then news item has a font size of 75M. Let's see. go a little bit bigger. 0.9 em. Okay. Below that, we want to show the number of points. Cool. We'll make that a little bit smaller. So let's just put this in a span. And give it a class of, well, actually, I think this entire second line will probably have the same font size. So let's just give this a class of news item details. And then our news item details will have a font size that's a little bit smaller of like 0.7 em. Nice. So we'll say points by item.username, I think. No, let's see what the property is for user. Just user. By someone. 3 hours ago, so I think we do also have the time ago. Yep. Item.time ago. What else do we need? We could allow them to hide it, and then we have number of comments. Comments count. Cool. That's great. We want the title to link to it. We also want the whole thing to have a little bit of padding. So on the home page, let's say we have a padding of 2em. Should push everything in a little bit. It's a little bit too much. 1em, like that. We're not going to show them upvoting it. We could actually show... I don't want to show a number. I'm not going to show a number. I think that's good. Cool. So Gene in the chat is asking, I'm new to Vue. Do you have any resources to help a JavaScript and Vue newbie? If you're new to JavaScript, I recommend... let me think of the name of it. Isn't it like Code Along, I think? There's this one video course. Watch and Code, that's the one. So this is a totally free course. It is by a guy named... I forget his name, but it's a really cool course. And if you're totally new to programming and totally new to JavaScript, I highly recommend it. Check it out. And then if you're looking to get started with Vue.js, if you check out on YouTube, there's Academind on YouTube. That's the one. And if you look at their playlists, they have a beginner Vue.js playlist. Yeah, Vue 2 getting started. This one is absolutely great. I've recommended it to a lot of people, and they've learned the basics of Vue with that video course. So those are some resources I recommend for that. Bafana is asking, can one follow along with this project but using a different framework or library? Possibly, yeah. I mean, I think the one common thing with this project is that we're using this API here. So if you're contacting the same API, you're going to get the same data, but you would just have to figure out how to use that data with whatever framework or library that you're using. Molders is asking, what is your secret to be a developer like that? No secret. I've just been coding for a very long time, and I love coding, and I just keep coding. That's my secret. Yeah, and Pijo is mentioning the Academind's Vue course. Yeah, so Academind's has a free course on YouTube, but they also have a pay course on Udemy, which I haven't taken personally, but other people have recommended it. Hello, Hatim. Welcome to the stream. Frank Johnson is saying CSS counter for the number. What do we mean? Do we mean this? Oh, you mean for the number on the left? Is that a thing I can do? I've never heard of a CSS counter. No way! This is new to me. Thanks for introducing it, Frank. Okay. Yeah, so I could do a before content counter. Wow. That's so weird. I've never seen this before. I had no idea that you could do that with CSS. To use the CSS counter, it must first be initialized to a value with the counter reset property, 0 by default. Okay, so I want to set it to 1. I guess this defaults it. This will default to 1 because it gets incremented. I don't know, but let's figure it out. This is cool. I'm excited about this. I've never used it before. Okay, so the home element is the parent element, so that's where we will reset it. And we'll call this news. That's going to be the name of our counter variable. And then we need to put a counter on it. The only issue is my news item is scoped. I guess this doesn't have to be scoped because with having it not scoped, I should be able to use the counter item. For and we called it news. And really, we just want to have the number and then a period and a space. Let's see what happens. Whoa, it works. We need to style it a little bit, but that is so cool. Yeah, look at that. Thanks for the suggestion, Frank. Oh yeah, Bohan is mentioning Free Code Camp. That's another really good resource. They have like an entire course, start to finish, learning web development, front end and back end. Free Fow is asking, what is your opinion on Svelte? I think it's really cool. It's definitely in its early days, so there's not a large community around it, and it's not exactly battle tested yet, meaning that like there aren't hundreds of sites using it and hundreds of developers. So that's one thing about it. But at the same time, it has really cool ideas, and the syntax is really nice. I like it. Frank says, yeah, thanks for your streams. You're welcome. Thanks for the suggestion. That's cool. Yeah, Maximilian from Academine. So Maximilian's the guy that does a lot of the Academine videos. Yeah, he definitely knows a ton. Okay, so how can I style this, though? Because the news item is a div. Actually, I think I can do news item. Let's call this... Let's give this a class of news item title. And then we'll put it before the news item title. So that way it shows up on the same line. Awesome. And I think, yeah, the number is like a slightly different color. That color. Nice. I like it. FreeFow is asking, do I do Golang or any other low-level language? No. So mainly I've just been using JavaScript. So even for backend stuff, I'm using node.js. Haven't really done any lower-level languages recently. in a long time, actually. I used to do C#, which is not a super low level language, but it is a compiled language. I did that for a while. John says, I just graduated from college, studied CSED. You inspired me so much. Thanks for the streams. You're very welcome. Glad I could inspire you. Now go out into the world and write some code, build some stuff. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I think I want to put that in a little bit. Yeah, it should be underneath. So news item details needs like a margin left of 2M. Nice. Yeah, and the details actually have the same color as the number. Cool. Look what we made. All right, now let's make it more interesting. We should set up Vuex so that our data is coming from the store. We're going to try to use these vue hooks. So we're going to use store or use state to actually get the data from the store. And then we'll create an action which like gets the latest data. Okay, let's do it. So by default, because I set this up with the Vue CLI, we have our store. It's a super basic store. And I could create some submodules. I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to make them top level items because we have some pretty basic interactions. So we have, let's call it news items. Initially is an empty array. And then we'll have new, like, current news item. So when someone clicks on a story, we'll set this to be the story that they're currently reading. And then we'll also have like a loading variable that's initially false. But this will allow us to say whether or not we're actually like loading stuff in the background. Cool. We need our mutations, so we'll make some simple ones. Let's pull up the Vuex docs. I haven't worked with Vuex in a while. Mutations. Yeah, so there's like increment and stuff like that. I'll just say like set news items. So it takes in the state, and then it takes in the news items. We'll say state.news items equals news items. Easy. Similarly, we'll have set current news item. And so we'll say state.current news item equals news item. And then lastly, we'll have set loading. Okay, so we have our basic state. We have our mutations, which are updating the state. And then we need some actions. So one action would be something like get news items. Let's see, actions will take in the context, and I believe yeah, the second property is like parameters that get passed in. So say get news items, got our context, and then the convention is to call this thing payload. I don't like that because it's super generic. But you know what? We can destructure it. So we're going to say that the thing that we're passing into this action is going to be an object, and we want to get the type and the page, which will default to 1. So type is going to be things like news, newest, show, ask, or jobs. And then page will be what page we're requesting. So that's great. Okay. And then this does need to be async. And this is where we can do the fetching. So right now we were doing that in home. We're going to do that in here. So we will grab that base URL too. And instead of just saying news, we'll default to, not default, but we'll use the type, and we'll pass in the page. So that should request it. We're going to get back, let's call this items, and then we'll say context.commit set items. And we can just destructure to pull in commit. And just because we're here, let's create some types. What did they call these? They were calling them, yeah, let's call them types. And really, it's just going to be the names of these functions. But we can, like, the convention typically is to capitalize them, like set news items. And then that's just a string. Set current news item. And then that's just a string. And then set loading. And then that's just a string, like that. And then here we can dynamically name these functions. So this would be types dot set news items. Types dot set current news item. Types dot set loading. Yeah. So now our functions will have these names, but then the useful thing about this is I don't have to pass strings around. So right here, if I do commit types dot set news items and then pass in items, now I don't just have like strings roaming around for the types of things that I'm going to be setting. Cool. I think this is what we need. So we have a basic store. It has some state. Oh, I think one thing we need to do is set loading before and after. So we'll say types dot set loading to true, and then after we'll say it's false. Okay. Yeah, so we have our store. Let's actually use it inside of our component. So now inside of our component, instead of calling the API directly and having like this state here, we're actually going to use the Vuex store. And for that, we're going to install these vue-hooks, which have things like use state or use actions. And we're going to want to use both. We're going to want to use actions so that way we can call get news items. Yeah. And I guess we might actually add the names of the items to the types as well. Yeah, because dispatch takes in the type. Let's put this in our types as well. Get news items. Cool. And then we'll actually put these types in a separate file, so that way we can use them in our components whenever we're dispatching actions. Let's create a new file right here. We'll call this types.js. And here we'll just say export default. And then we need to import those in here. So we'll say import types from types. Cool. All right. Now we need to install this vue-hooks library. So we already have the vue-function-api. Here we'll install vue-hooks. We're in that directory. No, wrong thing. Let me copy that. like that. Okay. Chris Perez is saying context or commit. So commit is inside of context. So this variable is typically, you can call it whatever you want, but typically it's called context. Inside of it, it has a property called commit, which is a function. Here I'm just destructuring it, so I'm pulling commit out of the context. Hatim is asking, can I do a portfolio review someday? That might actually be pretty fun. Yeah. Maybe we'll start like a Twitter thread or something where you can link to your GitHub and your page and I can review it. That'd be cool. See you later, Brooks. Thanks for tuning in. Yes, I did destructure it, and so that way I can just call commit. Cool, yeah. Okay, so we added the vue hooks. Now, how do we use them? I think this library doesn't have documentation yet, and there was an issue. Yeah, example of use state. So this is how we would do it. Okay, so inside of the component, we import the different hooks that we need or want. So in my component, I want to use state, and I want to use the loading variable and the news items variable. So on home, now let's just get rid of everything. we have to rewrite this entire component because now that we have Vuex. I think yeah, technically we still do want onCreated. And then we're going to import use state. And then I guess there's also, what's the other one? Is it use actions? Which is a hook for map actions. How does map actions work? Typically, you put these on your methods. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Okay, but use state. I want to use state. So in here, let's look at their example again. So it's passing in an array with count in it. Kind of don't like that because I think what that means is, so let's say I want the, oh no, it's destructuring it. Okay. Okay. So I want loading and I want news items. So on my store, I have loading and news items. So I'm going to bring those two things into my component here. So this will give me loading and news items. Great. Now to make those two properties available in the template, I need to return an object that has those on it. Great. But I called it items before, so this needs to be news items. Cool. And then now on created, I need to dispatch an action. How am I going to do that? I don't know. I'm curious, like, what happens if we log this inside of here? Like, do I have access to, like, this dot store, $store? Let's see. Error in render, reference error not found the view instance. Let's make sure we set this up correctly. So we installed it. Oh, we got to use it. Okay, so just like we did with the plugin from vue-function-api, we need to do the same thing with these vue hooks. So in our main.js, we'll import that in, and then we'll use it. Okay, let's see what happens. Cool. This is undefined. Let's look at the context. See if that has a $store on it. Okay, So we have adders, emit, parent, refs, root, slots. We have, yeah, so technically we have root.$store, and that would allow us to, not commit, but, what's the word? I want to dispatch an action. However, we might be able to say use action, which will allow us to basically get a function that we can call inside of our component. Let's see what this even returns. Vuex helper, use actions. I'm looking at the source code of this thing just to see how it all works. Helpers. Map actions. Let's just try it. I have a hunch on how this might work. So we have use actions. We need to import that. Use actions, and don't need those arguments anymore. But if I say let's just call it actions equals use actions, and then we pass in the names of the actions that we want. In this case, I want the action called get news items. I'm just going to pass it in as a string right now, but eventually I will want to use the types. Does that work? It works. That's a function that I can call. Okay. So yeah, let's bring in our types so that way I don't have to pass this in as a string. Yeah, let's import types from types. And then here I can say use actions types.get news items. And technically I can destructure this. And now in my onCreated, I can pass in an object that has, let's see what we're expecting. We're expecting an object that has a type and a page number. So here we'll say the type is news and the page is 1. So when the component gets created, we're going to dispatch that get news items action and tell it the type we want is news. Our store is going to see that, make the API request. It will then set the items on state, which in turn we have access to here, which in turn we should see in the UI. And it works. It works. Wow. Okay. Do I have the Vue DevTools? We can actually see this stuff happening. Vue. If we want to look at Vuex. Cool. So we did set loading, which set loading to true. We made the API request. We did set news items, which put all of those on our state, and then we set loading to false. And then those news items made it back to our component. Wowee. So these hooks are pretty cool. So this made this component super simple because now I can just use the state and the actions from my store and use them there. So that's awesome. I guess technically we could add like load more. Let's see how they do it on Hacker News. They say more, and that just loads a second page. Let's see what we can do. So if we have a more button at the end, let's have a p tag. This needs that nice gray color. Okay, so I want to click that, and it should load more. So let's say at click equals load more. And then I'll need a function that loads more. Yeah. Okay. So we'll have load more, which will be a function. And I think what I want is I actually want to keep track of what page we've loaded. So for that, I actually am going to use value. So inside of the component, we know what page we're on. And then we're just telling the store to get a specific page, but the store doesn't know what page we're on. Okay, so let's say current page is going to be value, starts off at 1. And here we'll pass in current page. So when it gets created, we request page 1. And then if we click if we do load more, we'll say current page dot value plus equals 1. And then we'll call get news items with current page. And actually, I think this should be current page dot value. Yeah. And then this is calling the load more function, so we need to make the load more function available in the template like that. Let's see what happens. Okay, no errors. More. That gets the next ones. One thing I guess we might do is, so you see how this, it has the same numbers, and we just kind of like overwrite the ones that are already there, because that is technically getting more. I guess we could have logic in our store that says, if the page is 1, reset the array. But if the page is greater than 1, we just append to it instead of overwriting it. So let's update our store. Say get news items. We'll say if page is equal to 1, then set the news items. Else, we'll say like append news items. And then we'll, how do you spell append? 1P? Append? 2Ps? It looks weird in all caps. I think that's append. So let's add another type. Append news items. And then we need another mutation. So we'll say types dot append news items. And then now, instead of overwriting the news items, we'll just say state.newsItems equals state.newsItems.concat the new news items. Cool. And so now, when we click more, we should get more. There we go. More. Yeah, it looks like it's when we get the next page, there's a duplicate, which I don't like. Let's see. It looks like yeah, like this one's, oh, those two are duplicated. This API is a little weird. And then that one is duplicated. I mean, I guess technically we could filter out any things that aren't duplicates. This is just like extra logic in our store, but let's do it. So here, when we are concatenating the news items, we want to filter out any news items that we've already seen. So let's do this. We'll say unique IDs. This is going to be an object. And then, so this is going to create a new array with everything in it, but then I want to iterate over the array, and if we come across a duplicate, we won't include it. So let's just do a filter on each item. And we'll say if not unique IDs at item.id, Then we're going to set it. So we'll say unique ID is that item ID equals true. And then we'll return true. Else we'll return false. So basically, the first time we see an item with a given ID, we'll return true, which means it will show up in this filter. But if we've already seen it before, we'll skip over it, and that should get rid of the duplicates. Let's see what happens. More? Nice. The interesting thing, though, is it's not like an even number anymore, because instead of loading the next 30, it's like less than the next 30 because we removed any duplicates that might have shown up already. Cool. All right. I like this store. I like what's going on here. Our component is interesting. I think I guess the next thing is let's make it so that each of these different pages will work. So we have like news, newest, show, ask, jobs, etc. Let's take a look at the chat, see what people are saying. Import Vuex, map state. Map state needs to be in a computed property. Could use watch. See you later, Felix. Thanks for tuning in. Hatem is saying maybe add even odd background colors to columns. I think I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the code worked the first time. That was fun. Okay. Yeah, let's get these different pages working. I think what I'll do is I don't necessarily need totally separate routes. I'm thinking I could just do like /news /newest. I don't know. Hello, Emiliano from Argentina, and hello, Lamp Alcoholic from Germany. Welcome to the stream. Okay, let's figure out how we're gonna do this. I'm trying to think. Like, I could turn this whole thing into a reusable function component, right? Because this is all the logic we need to load the news items for a given page. However, the thing that's different is the type. And so we could make like a function that takes in the type, but then it gives you back this component that allows you to load the given news items. Kind of like that. However, we would have to create like several different components. I could just use the type in the URL. Honestly, I think that's what I'm gonna do. So if the type isn't defined, then we load news. Yeah, so let's do this. If we look at our nav bar, this should go to newest, show, ask, and jobs. And if we look at our API, newest, show, ask, and jobs, it's the same thing. So that's easy enough. And if we look at our routes, we have this about route. We don't need that. We'll get rid of it. Let's get rid of that about view. Yeah, so these are working. I guess what I want is the home page should actually load no matter which route you're on. Can I define multiple paths with view router? Dynamic route matching. I don't want a dynamic segment. I guess I kind of do. But the only thing is, later on, I'm going to need a route that's like item/ID. Let's just do this. So this should be type. So Yeah, and I think we'll yeah, here's what we'll do. We'll redirect to /news by default. Okay, I'm figuring this out as we go, but I think this is how I'm going to do it. So now the home component can look at the URL and know what the type is so that it can dispatch that. And we'll have to watch it, so we will use that watch function from the API to watch if the URL changes, and then use it to specify the type whenever we do the dispatch. Okay. So because we have these vue hooks installed, we definitely want to use router. So let's bring it in. So in our home component, we're going to bring in use router. And let's see how this works. Let's call it stuff. And we'll say use router. Let's see what we get. So we get the current route. So if I do like route dot value dot params dot type, that's going to give me what the current type is. So I like that. So route dot value dot params dot type. Let's copy that path. And then now when we specify the type, we're going to pass that in. So so here we'll pull off the route from use router. Same thing here. So when it's news, we get the news. Let's do jobs. I'll have to refresh it because I'm not watching the URL just yet. But if we load jobs, awesome. These are jobs. If you look at ask, again, I have to refresh it, but these are questions. If I go to show, there should be a bunch of show HN. Cool. So it's reading the type from the URL, but now we actually want to watch if when that URL changes, so that we can refresh the data to be that specific type. And technically this should still work. So if I do more, we should just see more. Let's look at our network to make sure we're making that request. Okay, so this is news. If we do more, we get more news. Cool. If we do show and we do more, it does show. Cool. Cool, 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 cool. Frau is asking, why not try to make this client look better? I personally dislike the default look of Hacker News, mainly because I don't know. I'm getting carried away. I've been streaming for almost 2 hours now, but the main point of this whole thing is to demonstrate these hooks in the new function API. The style isn't as important. However, I will push this up to GitHub, and you are more than welcome to make a pull request with some new styles. Snookaloo is asking, am I going to do an 8-hour build again? I didn't plan on it anytime soon, but let's see how I'm doing on subscribers. Maybe when I get to 15,000. I'm currently at 13,000. Maybe. Okay, so now we want to use watch, because basically we want to watch for when the type in the params changes so that we can get the different type, and we'll reset it to start over and all that good stuff. Okay, so we're going to bring in watch here. And the way watch works is we want to watch, and the first parameter is the watched value. So the thing that we're going to be watching is that. And then the callback is what will be called when it changes. So let's just log it. And this should do it. So anytime the URL changes, we're going to see that type log to the console. Okay. Maybe that's not what I need. Let's look at... Again, they don't have a lot of documentation, but... someone showed how to use this. Oh, not this. I need, oh, never mind. I need to look at watch. How does watch work? And if we see some examples, oh, so a function, yeah, so I can do a getter. So a function that returns that value. So let's do this. So it's a function that returns route.value.params.type. And whenever this changes, or whenever the return value of that function is different, this function will get called. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it's show, and then it's newest, and then it's news, and ask, and jobs. Awesome. So whenever it changes, this function runs. This is where we can do something interesting. Yeah. I kind of want to create a function. So like a function that's called like set current type or something like that. And well, it's not setting it, but it's gonna reset it. So basically, I want to do this. With the type, and the current page is going to get reset to 1. So what I would want to do here is say current page.value equals 1. So that way it goes back to the beginning, and then we'll get the news items. And what I can do on created is say set current type and then pass in the type. So now, whenever we're watching this, we basically just want to do this same thing. So we have this nice little function which resets the current page to 1 and then dispatches the action to get the latest news items for that given type. And then we're also watching the route params so that whenever they change, we're calling the current type to change, and it resets it to page 1. Let's see what happens. All right, so we're on jobs. We can go to news. Nice. We can go to show. We can go to ask, jobs. And then if I click more, we should see more jobs. It might be that there are no more jobs. Let's see. Yeah, page 3 is an empty array. So that's great. If I go back to news, everything works just fine. I can click more load. This is great. It's too easy. Newest. More. Cool. I think one thing I want to do is in the store, whenever we set loading to true, I think we're going to reset the array. Well, we don't want to reset the array because we only want to reset the array if page is 1. Let's do this. Right before we'll say if page is equal to 1, then we want to set news items to be the empty array. So whenever you're requesting the first page, we want to make sure that you don't see anything and it just says loading first. So if we go to newest, oh, we are there. If we go to news, it flashes really quick. But the idea is I don't want to show any of the old stuff while it's loading. And early, let's just set a timeout. Like a 2-second timeout. Really just for suspense. So loading, there they are. Newest, loading, there they are. I think I also don't want to show the more button if we are loading. So we'll say v if not loading. Cool. I guess loading, maybe we want this to be at the bottom. Let's see. Loading. There they are. More loading. There they are. More loading. There they are. Cool. And if I go to news, loading, there it is. I can go to more news. Cool. All right. I really like this. It is very functional. So like our watch takes in a function to know what is changing, and then the second parameter is a function that will get called when it's changed. OnCreated takes in a function. Yeah, it's just a lot of little functions. I've been programming in React for like close to a year now, and so I've been doing a lot of functional style programming, and I don't know. It's not for everyone. I'll say that. Like this is very different than if you were to build this using the Vue 2.0 API with like the computed properties and methods and data and stuff like that. But I like it. I kind of like it. All right. Yeah, Demir is asking, can we do a quick hover pointer effect on the more button? Absolutely. Let's say cursor is pointer. Yeah. That way people know that they can click on it. There you go. Harsh Patel is saying, I'm changing from React to Vue just because of you. Thanks, EJ. You're welcome. They're both okay. I've slowly gotten used to React, but still I much prefer Vue over React. I know. All right, see you later, Amy. Have a good night. All right, where do we go from here? Let's look at our README. This is fun though. We're using hooks. We're using these things from the vue-function-api. We have the news page, reusable news list component in a way. Let's create the Vue single item page. This is where it might get a little more interesting because we actually will want to show all of the comments, and that could be interesting how we show like nested comments. Okay. But let's make it so that when we click on comments, it goes to that specific page for that item. So on the news item component, we actually want comments to link. So we're going to make this a router link. Okay, so a router link, and this is going to go to, and I'm going to give it an object. So the name of the route I want to go to, let me get all this going. Okay, the name of the route we want to go to will be news item. And then the params are going to be ID is item.id. So we're going to create a route called news item that accepts an ID so that it will load that one given news item. And then in our router, we need to define that route. So the path will be, and actually we'll define it first. So the path will be item/some ID. The name is news item. For now, we'll just leave it as the home component, but we should at least see the URL change whenever we click on comment. So, yeah, you'll notice if I hover, you can see in the bottom left, that's going to /item/thingy. Yeah, so that works. So now we need to create a news item page. Let's do that. So in our views, let's create a new file. We'll call it news item.vue. Scaffold it out. And then now in our router, we'll bring that component in. We'll use it right there. So we'll wait for him to load. If we click a single item, it goes to the news item page with that ID, and now we need to request that single news item to get all of the comments and everything else. Let's do that. And we'll do that all in the store. So we go to the store. We have get news items, not items. And so we want another function that's going to be get news item with a given ID. So in our types, let's create get news item singular. And then we can create an action here. Types.getNewsItem takes in commit, and in this case, we'll just take in the ID of the news item that we want. Okay. Here we're going to set loading to true. And then we need to make an API request. In this case, I believe it's just item/ID. If you look back at my README, yeah, /item/the ID of that item that we want. Cool. So that makes the request for it. We'll just call this item. And then we'll just do a little set timeout. This is too long. Let's do 1 second. I'm really only adding the set timeout so we don't see like a flash of text. We see the loading for at least for a little bit. And then we'll commit types.set current news item to be that item. Cool. So when we dispatch this action, it's going to get the item with that ID from the API, and then it will do the set current news item, which in turn will set the current news item on our state. That's great. So now on the news item page, we need to bring in those two properties from our state. We need to bring in current news item and loading. Okay, so let's import use state from this thing. We have our setup function. We're going to say loading and current news item is going to be equal to use state. Whoa, now. And we pass in an array of the properties we want. So we want loading and we want current news item. Cool. And then this will return an object with those two properties on it. And now right here, we'll just show current news item dot title. See what we get. There is no title, but oh, because we need to dispatch the action. Okay, so we need the onCreated function from the vue-function-api. And then on created, we need to dispatch an action. So we also need to bring into use actions. And we'll go ahead and import our types. Okay. So here we can say const actions equals use actions. And this will take in the name of the action. So we want get news item singular. We'll destructure to grab off that function. And now we can call it. I guess the other thing we'll need is the router because we need to get this ID from the URL. So we also need use router. Use router. And so on created, we are going to say get news item. And then the argument is just the ID. So we'll say route.value.params.id. And that should get the news item with the ID of the page that we're on. Let's look at the network request. There it is. Cool. So if we go back to the news, click something else like Robinhood stored passwords in plain text. Give it a second, and there it is. So I think, again, we want to show, like, loading, if it's loading. So here we go. Okay, so when the page loads, it says loading, and then did it break? Oh, we need to set loading to false in our store. So here we set loading to true, and then now we'll say loading is false. There we go. Okay, so loading, there's the title. And then if we go back to news, loading, there's the items. Go to this, loading, there's the title. Cool. So we have all the info. Now it's just a matter of showing it on the page. I guess we don't necessarily have to look for the change of the ID, because right now there's not really a way to go to a different item ID from when you're on a current item ID. So we shouldn't have to watch the URL. Cool. So now let's get this page going. Let's look at how this works. If we look at the comments, we're not going to let them add a comment. I think what's interesting is we can probably use that news item component right here. Yeah, let's do it. So on the, wait, I have a view called news item and a component called news item. That's not good. Yeah, that was a horrible naming choice on my part. Let's call this item page. And then we'll have to update it in our router. We'll call it news. Let's call it news item view. How about that? And then we'll rename this to news item view. Okay, so we know that news item view is the entire page. News item is just an individual news item that shows like the details of that news item. But what I want to do is load that in so that way it shows the news item at the top, but then we're going to just load all the comments below it. So let's import that component. And then we register as it as a component. And then we can use it. So we'll bind item to be current news item. Nice. Let's see. Yeah, that just links back to itself. I mean, these are all links, but I think it's totally fine. I think one thing is we do want to hide that number. How can we do that? I guess the issue is like this is CSS. And technically, let's do this. Can we be more specific? So let's give this a class of like current news item. And then in our style, if we say current news item, whoop, 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 that has a descendant news item title, and the before the content should be none. So if the parent is current news item, don't show that. Yeah, nice. So it disappears. Cool. But if we go to the news page, they should still be there, and they are. Cool. Okay. We definitely need to add some padding on here. I think our home page, is that where the padding is in the background color? Okay. We're gonna do something very similar on the news item page. And let's move this class to the top level div. Cool. All right. Now we want to show all of the comments below. So let's do that. If we look at the data that we're getting back, let's log. Because we can't really log it. We'll log it in the store. That item, just to see what properties we have. I think we're really just going to do dot comments to show all the comments. So let's see. User, URL, link. Cool. So really we just got to do dot comments and then show the comments. Yeah, let's do it. So we'll keep logging it so we can see the properties. Now we'll have right here, let's create a component called comment, and we'll say v for comment in current news item dot comments. The key is going to be comment dot id, and we'll pass down the comment. I guess what should we call it? Data. I don't like having a component called comment that has a prop called comment. Let's call it data. Okay, now we need a comment component. Right now, let's do like an h5 that says comment. I guess we could define our props, data, and the thing we want is data.content. Let's see. And now we need to register that component. So in our news item view, we will import comment from component / comment, and then we'll register it. And there they are. I guess technically we could use v-html. I think v-html does escape the content, so cool. But we're showing the contents. I think what we'll do is we'll actually get recursive with it, and if it has child comments, we just put a comment below it that's indented a little bit. That should be pretty easy. What do we need to show, though? We need to show the comment username and then when it was posted. So we have comment.user. Okay, let's style this thing. So we'll have a div. We'll have a p tag that has data.user, and then a p tag below it that has data.content. And then next to the username, we probably have a time ago property. Let's see. We're missing a curly. Yep. So let's style it a little bit. So we'll say comment title has a font size of 0.8 em, and comment content has a font size of 0.7 em. And we'll give this whole thing a class of comment. See what we get. Cool. We do want the font of the title to be that other gray color. This, not that one. This one. And then our content will have a margin right of like 2em, just so it's in a little bit. Oh, margin left, sorry. Too much. Yep. And yeah, I think here we'll use vue-HTML just so it will render it. v-html equals data.content. Yeah, so if they have styling or whatever, it renders that. That's cool. Yeah, and now we need to show the nested comments. So below a given comment, you should see all of its comments. So how are we going to do that? Can we just use the comment component right here? I'll say v4 comment in data.comments. The key is comment.id. And the data is the comment. It broke. Unknown custom element comment. Did you register the component correctly? This is where it gets tricky because I want to use the comment component inside of itself. And I don't know how to do that. I think what I might try doing is a global component registration rather than the local registration like this. So let's see. If I go to my main.js, it's the way to register a component. Vue dot. Can I specify components here? Let's look it up. Vue global component registration. Global registration. So far we've only created components using vue.component. These components are globally registered. That means they can be used in the template of any Vue instance. Okay. In these cases, then define the components you like in a components option. Yeah. Okay. This is weird because the docs say you do like vue.component, and I think we do that. Maybe we do that. Okay, so if I import in the component right here, like that, and then I say vue.component, and I give it the name comment, pass it in right there, will that work? That works. Cool. What I need to do is put this in a div and then indent it a little, so that way each nested comment gets more and more indented. Comment reply. And then comment reply has a margin left of 2em. Nice. Nice. Okay. So we see like comment. We know that these are replies because they're at the same level. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. We could add like minimizing and such. Yeah. Let's catch up on the chat, see if anybody has said anything interesting. Legend says, "Are you an angel? I'm not an angel. I am just but a man." Wally Oxen says, "Scoped before with no content." I think this is in reference to the individual news item, which I think I figured out. Where are we? I guess I did it in news item view. Yeah, I don't know. Mr. Taylor says, maybe machine learning, deep learning in JavaScript, Vue, and React. Yeah, I haven't really done any of that stuff before, but it would be fun to do. The Coding Cat asks, what did you miss? You missed everything. I'm basically done. So this is my Hacker News clone. We can see the news. We can look at the comments for a given post. Look at that. I made that all by myself. Just real quick, I think I want to get the things linking, because right now the title itself doesn't link, and we want to be able to click on the titles so that they go to that news story. Where are we? Okay, so on the homepage is where we're listing all of the news items. Okay, and the news item, this is where we need to add the anchor tag. So like right here, to make the title link, say href equals item.url, I think. Yeah, and that goes to it. We do want to remove the styling though. So news item title, anchor tag has text decoration of none. It has color of initial. Should make it black, I think. Yeah. And I guess let's make it bold. Yeah, so those will go out to the actual stories. The other thing is we could show the domain, because I think that's included in the data. Let's look at the network tab. Yeah, we do have domain, so we could show that off to the side. That would be interesting, I guess. Yeah. I actually don't like that it's bold. Can we do like a lesser? Yeah, like what if we do 100? What about 200? Nothing. 300. 400. Yeah, font weight doesn't work with this particular font. That's okay. Yeah, I guess we do want that to be the grayish color. So let's do this. Just create a little span. And we'll put that inside of it. And give it a class of domain. So news item title domain has that nice gray color. Cool. But now the space goes away. I don't like that. Space. There it is. Okay. Anything else? What am I missing? This is pretty cool, honestly. Worked out pretty nicely. Yeah. Have I used enough hooks and the function API? That is the question. Okay. Let's start at the top. So if we look at our app.vue, this component has no logic in it, so it's not using the function API, but we do have our navbar and we have our router view. If we look at our navbar, I guess technically we could use a little bit of state in here because maybe we could just iterate over the links to show the link to them. But, you know, I think it's fine, honestly. And then our app also has the router view, which shows the home page. The home page shows all the news items. And then there's a more button, which will load more. This is where we get into some serious vue-function-api usage. So we're using value to keep track of what page you're on. We're using watch to watch the URL to see if you switch between pages. And we're using onCreated so that when the component is created, we dispatch an action which loads the data for the given page that we're on. And then we're using vue-hooks to have these things like use state, use actions, use router. So inside of here, we can get access to the router, or the current route, which has the type in it. So the current route has things like news, newest, show, ask, etc. And then we have our action get news items, which actually goes off to the API to get them. So when the component is created, we say set current type to be the type in the URL. So either news or newest or show, etc. And then set current type dispatches the action with that type and the page that we want. And then also you can click load more, which increments the page value and then gets the next page of results from the API. It's pretty simple stuff, but it's nice. I don't know. And then, yeah, our other components are pretty basic. We have news item. Let's format this real quick. Yeah. Snow Kilo is asking, what is the eye icon in the bottom of VS Code? I don't know. What is it? Spelling. Oh, spell check. English. Okay. What? Oh, it's not doing it. Okay. Mr. Taylor is asking, have you done any stock market in Vue or React? I have not. Danny Fritz is saying, oh wow, Vue switched to hooks too. It's moving to that. Yeah, so I mentioned at the beginning of the stream that all of the stuff I'm using is like bleeding edge and is not actually supported yet. So I'm actually using this package called Vue. The spell check kicked in. Suggestions: do, q, su, ru. No, I don't like that. Let's turn this off. So vue-function-api is like someone it's almost like it's not a polyfill because they created it before it even exists, but there's currently an RFC for Vue version 3, which will allow you to create these functional components where instead of having like a data and methods and etc., you can just have a setup function, do all your functional type stuff in there. Whatever is returned here is accessible in the template. So that's the new functional component API. And then these hooks were just created by this guy, U3U, to show the possibilities in the future where if you are using the Vue functional API, you would probably want to use hook style things in them. They work very, very, like under the hood, it is completely and totally different than how they work in React. You don't have the issue of the use state always has to be defined in the same order. It's using Vue's reactive properties. Like it's way under the hood. It's way cooler. On the surface, it looks kind of like React. We all love Pakwalan says, good morning from India. Hello, good morning. Yeah, and then like this use state thing is actually for Vuex. So I have a store set up that has some basic state, like news items, that's the array of items. Current news item, that's when you're viewing one individual one, and then whether or not anything is loading. We have mutations for the state. We have actions, which will get all of the news items or get an individual news item. And then those hooks. I actually don't like that they call them hooks because it's not React. I mean, they look similar, but under the hood they're not doing the same thing. But then those hooks allow me to grab the state and use them in my setup function here, or grab actions and use them in my setup function here. Yeah. What else? Yeah, we're showing the link, the description, the comments. We have nested comment replies. I think I'm done. So like, honestly, I wanted to show the advantages of using things like using this new functional component API. Because the thing about it, you'll notice that this is a very simple function that just returns an object. So ultimately, what that means, or the implications of this, are that you can define this function in a separate file and then reuse it in different components. So it's kind of like a mix-in, but ultimately you would just end up like spreading the return of it in your return object, which makes your Vue components much more composable and reusable. And I really didn't get to demonstrate that in this app because it kind of all just worked out without it. Cool. Rust chat app. Let's check it out. Oh, cool. Is it terminal based? Let's see the comments. 0 comments. Yeah, there's no comments. Oh, my space disappeared for the domain on an individual news item view. Oh, no, on the news item component. There we go. Mr. Taylor is asking, what is your preference, Vue or React? I prefer Vue, 100%. I do write React on a daily basis at my job, though. Okay, let's deploy this thing to the web, and then I'm done. I've been streaming for 2.5 hours. I'm done. Okay, let's build it. Gonna kill it. We'll go into the dist directory. Create a basic now config. We're gonna call this hacker news vue functional. Vue 3 function API. Yeah, it's a static app. We're going to deploy the current folder. That's our alias. Great. I'm actually going to get rid of the builds and the alias just so, like by default, it'll deploy that directory. Oh, not the alias. Oh, let me undo that. I'm going to get rid of builds because by default, if you deploy a folder, it does it as a static app. So that's all I want. Deploy. Danny Fritz is asking, can you do local state with Vue functional components? You absolutely can. At the beginning of the stream, I showed like a super basic example. I actually have it on my personal GitHub. But it has a function called value, and that allows you to specify a single reactive property. You set the initial state, but then after that, it behaves just like it would in Vue. Yeah, you can check out my repo here to see some examples. But you use it like this. So you bring in value from this vue-function-api library. Eventually, you would just import it directly from Vue. But then you say, like, you define your property, you call value, and you specify the initial value. And then your return object, you just specify first name on there. And then you can use that inside of your template, just like you would with data. The one caveat is when you're modifying it or accessing it inside here, you actually have to say thing.value, because it's an object wrapper to help keep track of changes. Hello, Danielle. Welcome to the stream. I'm almost done. I just deployed. And it aliased it. Cool. Oh, yeah. I think I need to add a default redirect, because by default, it just goes to /. But you do have to click on one to get to it. Or cool. Yeah, how do I do a default redirect with view router? Redirect and alias. Oh, okay, cool. So I can say when the path is /redirect to /news. That's what I'm gonna do. Like that. Okay. Did I kill my app? Yeah, and that worked, because if you go to /, it will redirect to news. So that's great. Awesome. Let's build it again and deploy it. Curious, does it? Yeah, I deleted my. I have to recreate that now config. What did I call it? I called it this. Go! Cool, and it does the automatic redirect. Okay, awesome. I'll share that. You can check it out. Mohammed does say, good morning from Bangladesh. I'm just having my morning tea while watching this stream. Feels like a nice coincidence. I just started a Hacker News clone project using Next.js last night. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so you can see how I did some of the things. And yeah, we have news. We have newest, show, Hacker News, ask, jobs, which actually seem, maybe they're not old. They don't have any comments though. But, and then on any given news item, you can go into the comments and it loads all the comments up, which is nice. Cool. Mr. Taylor is asking, have you ever used React 360 and is there something like that for Vue? I've never heard of it. Let's see what it is. Create amazing 360 experiences. Whoa. No, I haven't seen anything like this for Vue.js specifically. Looks cool though. I'm sure there might be. If you just search for like Vue.js VR, or even like Vue.js 3.js, because I think 3.js actually does support having like a camera view, that kind of thing. But yeah. Pijo is asking, how do you not burn out coding 3 hours after work? I don't know. I'm just a weird dude. This excites me. It was fun to build something like this. I really thought it was going to get a bit more complex. Like, I was hoping it would get to a point where I actually could reuse one of my functional components, but it didn't really seem like I could. It was fun to use like the use actions and use state. I hadn't done that before, so that was fun. I don't know. It's fun. I'm learning. It's fun. Cool. Galang says, good morning from Bali. Good morning. Raul says, good night from the Bahamas. Thank you so much for the Feathers.js vids. Helped me so much. Glad to hear it. Okay. That thing's on the web. You can go check it out. I'll push up this code to GitHub. And I'll see you at some point in the future. I might, well, no, I won't be streaming this weekend. Got some family stuff to take care of. Maybe the weekend after that. But oh well. This was super fun. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. Until next time, here's this.